All right, so we're recording. It's 8:09. We'll go ahead and get started. So thank you everyone for being here tonight. For those of you who have been here the last two nights, really appreciate it. And thank you, President Ebert, for being willing to spend some time with us and answer some questions. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get into the first question to kick off the debate. After that, if you have a question, shout it out. If you want, last night people were putting questions in the chat and I was asking them when there was a break in the conversation. So either way works. So President Ebert, you served on the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau Board of Directors from 1996 until 2004 when you became the PFB Vice President and subsequently President in 2014. You have been on the PFB Executive Committee since 1998. In that time, PFB has had to sell SafeMark, discontinue the accounting services, and seen our membership fall by over half, among other things. While the change in the nationwide agreement can be blamed for some of this, our state board seemed slow to react, even as the writing was on the walls to this years prior, as Maryland had to go through the same process around 2015. With the PFB state office at Camp Hill seemingly being in a bit of disarray for a long time, why should we consider voting for you for president when you have been one of the leading voices at the table during some of this dysfunction? What do you plan to change if you are to be reelected president to help steady the ship? Why have you not tried to put some things into place now? And if you have, what has been the resistance? I know that was a lot. I'm going to put this entire question in the chat. And if you want me to rehash any of it, I certainly can. So thank you, sir.
Okay, all right, yep, thanks a lot. Appreciate the question. Just some back history, okay. SafeMark, actually, when I was just a board member on, we actually had the same conversation about getting rid of SafeMark. I'd say probably 20 years ago. That's when the name escapes me now, who the manager was. They were losing money. And the board was actually having a discussion of getting rid of SafeMark at that time. And Lou, that manager retired and he brought Glenn Rentz in and he was able to turn it around. And it made money for quite a few years, but as you know, business models change. A business like that sometimes can't react to the way, that business model was set up to sell wholesale. And that at that time was making the profit. That business model changed to retail making the profit. And they just couldn't adjust to that type of business model. They were working under old software. It would have cost a lot of money to upgrade that software. So that's where we got to the point where even Glenn, the manager, said, there's no way we can keep going with this business model. He even recommended selling it. Back when SafeMark actually started a long time ago, all the states carried it. And we were one of the last 3 states to have any SafeMark products at all. So I think, as decisions were made over those years, we tried to make sure to try to keep the business viable, but as times change with business models, same way with the nationwide business model, it changed. So that affected us. On the business services side, we always were looking at it, we're concerned about it, because the 3 entities that carried MSB are, the for-profit side. We have the health services side, the SafeMark side, and then MSC Business Services. For a long time, the health services side supported the MSC businesses. They paid a lot of the bills, and then when Obamacare came in, and we weren't allowed to have our associated health plan anymore, we saw those profits drop. So we really had to take a hard look at each entity and see what was profitable, what could be managed. Because actually, before Obamacare, health services was making over $3 million a year for us. And that covered a lot of our IT costs for the other businesses. You know, Lou Sally never really looked at each of those entities as long as they were carrying their own weight as an entity of all three of them. He was fine with that. But like I said, when association health plans went away, that whole business model changed there. And we really had to take a look at each entity. We've been trying to rectify MSC Business Services. The executive committee had been taking a hard look at it, especially after Mike Advantage left as manager. I mean, Mike wouldn't even go on the cloud with our information to help save money. And then whenever Mike left, Mike Belinsky come in, at least he moved a lot of the stuff to the cloud to save money on paper and printing costs and everything else like that. So it's sort of been a long time. We've always been trying to rectify the situation. The past couple of years after Mike Belinsky left, I was really hoping Victor would change things around. We engaged Crystal Scatias from Boyer and Ritter to help him take a look at the business, and she actually posed quite a few questions and procedures for him to implement, and he didn't do any of it. So we just got to the point where we saw that it was beyond repair. There was a subcommittee put together earlier this spring to take a really hard look at if there could be something done. I mean, in the back of my mind, I would love to have saved the service. The service was created as a member benefit. It worked for a lot of years, but it just got to a point where we realized after the subcommittee looked at it that it wasn't feasible to continue on. You know, just some background there. Earlier this spring, Crystal Scatias and Mike Victor, the manager, had called a mandatory meeting of the account supervisors. At that time, we had, I think, approximately 25 account supervisors. 9 actually got on that. It was a Zoom call. Only 9 of those account supervisors got on. So there was, you know, a lot of, I don't know, what do I say, agonistic account supervisors. You know, they really didn't want to work with us to try to rectify any of the shortcomings of the service. And we just kept getting more and more complaints. You know, more and more taxes weren't being filed on time. They were put on extensions. Actually, I was put on an extension this year. My taxes were just finally finished up here in September. At least I hope so. My fingers are crossed that they're done. But that's just the type of service that we were getting, and realized that it was beyond repair. I'm trying to think what other questions you had. I mean, I think I don't think there were bad decisions. We made decisions with the information we had at the time. Trying to get information out of the accounting service was worse than pulling teeth. Even when we were requesting the data of how many accounts they had, you know, there was a lot of resistance from our account supervisors to provide that information.
Okay, I'll sum up just as a refresher the last portion of the question, although the background to all that is quite helpful. What do you plan to change if you are to be reelected president to help steady the ship? And why have you not tried to put those things in place now? And if you have tried, what has been the resistance?
I've always tried to create stability in the office, just with the change. Figure I've been in there 8 years and I've gone through 4 managers already. Well, Todd's still there, so I hope he stays. Because, you know, we really work well together. You know, my biggest thing is I believe our member is first. and foremost for the organization. It's the most important part of the organization. And second, the county is our heart and soul of the organization. I'm not a one-man show. My agenda is to take our policies that our delegates pass and work with them to help provide solutions for agriculture. That's my agenda there. There's different personalities that on the board that can cause some conflict. Chris has a different leadership style than myself. I work with our members. I'm open to ideas. My door is always open to, concerns, comments, ideas on how to improve the organization. I don't have all the answers. The answers come from within the organization and the members. I help to navigate that and work with our staff in the office. And, I always compliment them and appreciate what they do for us.
Okay. You mentioned different personalities and some conflict from time to time, and I would assume that you've seen and probably read the letter from Kyle that was sent out.
Actually, I just saw it last night. I
Okay.
wasn't even aware of it. My state director texted me the night that it came out and said, was I aware of this letter? And I said, no, I was not aware of it. I had not seen it. So,
Okay. Have you had a chance to read it or no?
Yes, I have. Yes.
Okay. So the question I have regarding it, while he has his opinion on the president election, putting that aside, there is quite a big concern with why it seems like there is a disgruntled relationship between some of our staff and the current executive committee and the CAO, and how that relationship has been working and evolving ever since the guy who was there when I first joined, who went to AFBF.
Sam Kiefer, yes.
Ever since he left, there's been the water's been muddied. Mm-hmm. Can you help explain what's been going on, what your experience with that is, and where you think some of the things Kyle said in the letter came from?
When we did the interview for process and hired Mike Stilica, there was a committee formed. They interviewed, I forget how many, I think there was 20 some applications. The committee narrowed it down to, I think, 8, and then sort of did first interviews, and then selected 3 candidates to do in-house to the board, executive committee and board interviews. My concern with Mike was he came from the corporate world and didn't understand the farm builder family, but ultimately, the board decided on Mike as our new CAO. I worked well with Mike. I didn't realize that there was a little different leadership style there. He didn't really interact with staff as much as I was hoping he would have. So that caused some tension and heartburn in the office. And I think that was part of the turmoil there, because I was considered as a farm bureau family. We always work together. Agriculture works hand in hand, and I always worked well with the staff, And then when Mike left, we encouraged Todd to apply, and I think we're getting back to that farm bureau family. We've had quite a few retirements. We were expecting retirements, maybe a couple sooner than later, but I think there was always discussion of several of the managers were reaching retirement age, and I think some of the staff that were under them looked at other opportunities at the time because they weren't sure who was actually going to come in as managers for those divisions and take over. So when you have a top level CEO like that change, especially as drastic as it was, there's always change within the company itself. But I think things are really starting to settle down. And that's really one reason why I'd like to continue on, is because of my leadership style and the difference that Chris has. It's,
Okay. Does anybody have a burning question that they want to ask? If not, I'll keep throwing things out there. Or Rick, if you have anything you want to address, we'll just get going into bouncing back and forth.
No, I mean, I just have to say, I appreciate the opportunity to be, your voice. That's why I always felt it was my responsibility to be your voice out there in government at the AFBF level, sitting on the FBF board and the executive committee now. I've really worked hard at building relationships across the ag community, the different states. Like I said, different government agencies. 10 years ago, somebody mentioned EPA would be running in the opposite direction because we didn't want to deal with EPA, but I felt that we needed to build that relationship with them, and that we can at least sit down across the table from each other. We might not agree on everything, but at least we know what side, where we're coming from both sides.
Okay. Here we got a question from Dwayne Salem in the chat. I'll go ahead and read that off. How is the different leadership style of you and Chris going to work together if you win? You two, if you win, are going to have to continue to work together, as compared to if he wins, a new vice president will come in.
I've always worked well with Chris. I mean, we actually had a conversation before he decided to run. I don't hold anything against Chris at all. He just felt it was time to step up, and I was just concerned about a leadership change at this time. That's all.
I had a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah. The letter you were talking about, Kyle's letter, and he's the one that you're talking about the Kyle, the state government relations person that just resigned or just left. I don't know for what reasons. And obviously this letter seems to be stating why he left.
Yes.
And is that not necessary for the public? I mean, sounds like some people saw it, and of course I didn't.
I'll just tell you what I did. I got the letter in the mail, and within 20 minutes I had it scanned onto the computer and I emailed it out to our board. A letter like that sent to me as a county president, I sent it out to my entire board. That way everybody has the information. That's the way I handled it. I'm not sure how your county handled it. If you would like a copy of it, you don't have one, I can get it to you. But
so what you're saying, our county president probably has a copy.
the letter at the top says County Farm Bureau presidents and state board members. So I would assume that every county president and state board member received a copy. Yes.
Okay.
So I would contact one of them and ask for a copy.
We didn't have any meetings, recently, so
Right.
I hadn't heard about it, but I did hear about him leaving.
Right. Yep. All right. I have another question I'm going to ask, and I am, your leadership style, Rick, is servant leadership. You serve people well. I've talked to multiple former employees, and they've all said that. And we can see that you care for people. Sometimes, just for an observation, I think you come off a tad bit passive, which is fine. That everybody's personality is different. So this question isn't going to fit your personality well, but I need you to try to be a little bit more blunt, like myself or Mel or Julie, with your answer. So I really do want to drill down on why you're running for president. I know you've talked about you don't think a change now is good. I'm not trying to put you in a spot where you're attacking people, this, that, or the other. But I was told that when you ran for president, it was after a president stayed in far beyond the 8 years, and you didn't want to be in the same situation as what you'd said at the time.
Oh,
And now you're asking for a 9th and 10th
got you
year.
on a wrench.
So perspective that I have is, I'm not sure if I completely buy the only reason is the timing. And I wonder if you don't have concern as to the current status of the employee morale and the leadership style of Chris. If you have concerns regarding how you think Chris would lead, and if you have things that you think are red flags, we need to hear them. I'm not trying to get you to say negative things about Chris. I just think there's more to why you decided to run beyond the 8 years than what you're saying publicly.
Yeah, I mean, I know Kyle put his letter out there and that was his prerogative. My concern is, I've heard it from several staff members, if Chris became president, they will leave. Just because how aggressive he can be, and I hate to see more key staff leave the office.
And do you think that there is any chance of them riding it out a little bit to see if it works? Or do you think it's a wholesale, the election happens, they submit their 2 weeks and half our staff walks out the door? What's your gut tell you?
I know at least one person that will walk out the door that day if Chris wins.
Okay.
I really don't want to get into talking negative about Chris because, well, like I said, we've always worked well together, but some of the things that he gets into the office and is very aggressive about with talking with employees and that has left a sour taste in their mouths.
Okay. And that's fine. We don't need to go farther down that trail. So I'll spare that. Mel typed in the chat that she has a question. So go ahead, Mel, fire away.
Hey, Rick.
Hey, Mel, how are you tonight?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Good. So I have a couple questions, but I'm only going to ask one now, and then I'll let other people ask questions too. But I really just want to ask you the same questions that I asked Chris last night. So I'll start with the fact that, we've heard a lot of things about, Chris wanting to be the face of Farm Bureau, and we've seen a lot of him out there, especially in the last couple of years, let alone the last, few months. So my question to you is, why haven't we seen you as much? I mean, we all know you have the farm, you have all that, and you guys share responsibilities, but why haven't we seen you more then and over the past few months and years versus the last month when we've seen a lot more of you with, your Farm Bureau shorts and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I want to be out front and the face of agriculture, but I think the organization is more than what I am. I think we need to showcase more of our members. Like I said, I'm not a one-man show. I would love to highlight more of our members. You out there with promotion, different county leaders doing things. I mean, I've always said that's what makes Farm Bureau what it is. It's what the counties are doing out there. Yeah, I mean, I'm out doing things. I mean, I guess I could record more stuff. I've done stuff like over 4th of July, encouraging, enjoy the holidays, our independence and that. But I don't think I need to be front and center the whole time.
Very good answer.
Okay. Do you have another one, Mel? If not, I'll ask one from the chat.
Go for the chat, Doug. I'll ask
Okay.
my other question.
Okay. Similar question to this was asked last night. What is your education experience beyond the farm and your involvement in Farm Bureau, and how do you use that within the organization?
Okay, so I graduated from Penn State with a dairy science degree and also an ag education minor. So I've had some teaching experience when I graduated from Penn State, came back home. I actually did some substitute teaching for the local ag teachers for several years until we actually got the farm really up and running the way we wanted it, and then sort of backed away from teaching. So when I'm out working, I guess part of my passion is I had, grown up with 4-H and FFA, like a lot of our members have. And, I saw what our leaders and ag advisors did for me. So I've always committed to giving back as much as I can to the ag community and serving the ag community. I mean, I'm still a 4-H leader, involved in our local club. I'm on the superintendent of the fair, helped the week of the fair. So my experience that goes all the way back to, my high school years, still drives me to be that servant leader, and encourage and work with people and to make agriculture better in the state in whatever way I can.
Okay. Bill Beam said he has a question. So Bill's going to ask one. Hey, Bill.
Thank you, Doug, and thanks for being on, Rick.
Yep. How you doing tonight, Bill?
I'm doing pretty good. So it sounds like you've been on like 20 some years. I think Chris has also. Do you think, and I'll just be honest, part of the frustration, some of us don't feel like we're 100% represented. And there seems to be a system that perpetuates itself where the same people get on the exec committee just by design. Would you agree with that? That's question number one. And question number two, how can we improve this system?
I'd have to say, the past couple of years, I mean, I was always concerned with some of the motions for the executive committee just to continue it. I would like to see it rotated some, but I mean, I can't make those motions. I encourage people to run for the executive committee. I think that's healthy for the organization. I think some of it that they stayed on was because we were working through the pension fund. I mean, we finally got to where we terminated it. So that's a huge liability off of the organization. We just completed the paperwork of that. I mean, we were putting, past couple of years, $400,000 into our pension fund, and even before that, $700,000 to keep the pension fund funded. So this year we were able to finally, it was froze 11 years ago. Actually, when we froze it 11 years ago, we were under the understanding it was supposed to be paid off in 7 years and we were getting out of it. But with the way the market went, we were just finally able to completely terminate it and get that burden off of our books. So, I mean, I think change on the executive committee's, healthy. you know, I don't plan to stay forever either. I mean, actually, you know, Doug mentioned 8 years. Yeah, I would have loved to have been done this year, but you know, just with the concerns of what's been happening, the change in the office, I just didn't think, you know, quite a few people encouraged me to run again. I considered it, and that's why I decided, you know, I'll run again just to create some more stability in the office. Like I said, I've gone through 4 CEOs in 8 years. I mean, that's huge difference in personalities and, you know, trying to work with them, you know, especially Mike Stelica coming from corporate, you know, that's a whole different mindset than what the Farm Bureau family has. So.
Yeah, thank you for that. You know, one of the things that was brought up last night, and I think we have 2 people, if you count Chris, from the same county, basically on the executive board. To me, that's unfair to the other counties. So I'm just being very blunt. If we're going to be successful, we have to be transparent and represent everybody. So, and I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Rick.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you know, whenever we vote on the executive committee, whoever wants to run puts their name in or is nominated by somebody. So then it's up to the board to decide who actually sits on the executive committee. I mean, I guess we could actually have a bylaws change of actually specifying different regions.
Yes.
You know, if the county wants to do something like that, you know, it's open for discussion if that's what they want to do.
Okay.
Is that something you would push for, Chris or Rick? Sorry.
Would I support?
Yes.
I mean, there again, I mean, I think it would be healthy for the organization, but it's up to the delegates to decide that, you know, after the debate of, you know, whether they think that's a good idea. I mean, I would like to see, you know, more people run and change it up and come from all sectors of the state and that. But then again, it's up to the state board to seat the executive committee.
All right. Thank you.
All right, there's another question in the chat from Dwayne again. And this goes back to the letter. I'm going to try to formulate this best I can. Do you feel that having Todd come in as the CAO, let me back up. I talked to a former PFB employee about once this letter came out, because I needed context. And the way he described how the relationship is supposed to work is that you have the employees, you have the CAO, and then you have the executive committee. And the CAO is supposed to be that firewall between the two, where all the hard conversations happen here between the executive committee and the CAO. And then the CAO makes sure the employees are working well and have good morale and everything. When Sam Kiefer left, the CAO the executive committee acted as the CAO, and the waters got muddied. Bringing Todd in, has that put that firewall back in place? And how good of healing that issue do you think you're at? Obviously, I don't think we're back to normal yet, but how close do you think we are, and how's that process going?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, Todd and I work well together. I mean, there needs to be that firewall there. And I just think it got skewed a little bit, even with Michael in as CEO, that firewall had been broken down some. But I think it's definitely coming back, and Todd believes that firewall needs to be there and wants to make sure that's how things operate. Yes. I mean, actually the firewall between, you know, CAO, myself, executive committee, and the board, and then staff on the opposite side. So like everything, I usually try to email either to staff working with them Todd is carbon copied on, so he's aware of what's going on. I mean, just as an example, tonight, we were planning on, the board approved doing some advertising in the Huber International magazine. New Jersey did it last quarter, and New Jersey reached out to us to be part of a full page ad in that international flyer. And the board approved it, so New Jersey reached out to me tonight, and I actually forwarded that to both Justin and Todd, because Justin's in charge of government relations and communications.
Okay.
So I try to make sure that, Todd's actually, looped in on any type of discussion or anything that I'm having with staff and working with them, so. And we talk every day, at least once, if not twice a day.
Okay. A question in the chat from Howard Rayburn. What are your top 2 goals for PFB in your next term as president?
One is, like I said, to create the stability. The other is, trying to figure out how to engage our younger members more. I've been sort of having some conversations. We put a lot of stuff out, print material, Facebook. I think we really need, we started text messages. That takes time, because that person actually has to reach out to us before we can engage with them to get on our text message system. The rules being a commercial entity are different than somebody just setting up text messaging and getting everybody involved. So I'd like to work with our younger, I've actually had some conversations, about, Instagram, Snapchat, what can we do as an organization to engage those members? They want something instantaneous, and they can respond to it instantaneous. They don't want to sit through and read, a page email or, a print copy of something. We're all busy, and I think they're more of an instantaneous type crowd, and hopefully, we can develop some of those other social platforms to have, better engagement with them and encourage them to get involved in the organization.
Okay.
Any help that any of you guys can do, I'd be
Yeah.
very much appreciated. So I'm on Snapchat myself, or Twitter and app, but I look at it, but I don't do a whole lot with it. So
I just want to see Andy Engel dancing on TikTok. All right. Mel has another question. So let's go ahead and unmute yourself and go ahead, Mel.
All right. So let's get to
you're
the
gonna
nitty.
do a TikTok. You're gonna do me a TikTok video.
I can do a TikTok video. We've done that before, Rick, but you're going to have to put the pig costume back on.
I'll do that.
Or we can get Chris and the cow. I'm down for either. So there's a lot of talk about the executive committee and the decisions the executive committee has made, and the firewall, and Kyle's letter, and it all bases around this executive committee. And I'm really sorry, my dog's tail is hitting on everything. So as I understand it, the executive committee is Mr. Graybill, Jim Barber, Johnny Painter, Chris, yourself, and
That's it.
That's
There's
it.
five of us, yes.
As I understand it, the executive committee is run by the president. So as being on the executive committee, can you speak to why a lot of this stuff with the different accusations that were made by the executive committee, why this wasn't shut down, the breaking down of the firewall, as you say, and these things, why wasn't there a stop to that without obviously, speaking ill of anybody else, just from a leadership standpoint, why was there the secrecy over things and all of this happening to begin with?
You know, I try to, you know, inform the executive committee of their role and stuff like that. And I think I was just overrun with some of that. You know, like with the dairy situation, you know, I was trying to protect the organization from all the turmoil because of the new dairy policy of getting rid of the overorder premium. You know, my thoughts there was to, you know, sit out that first hearing, let's see how things go, make the statement that we weren't there because we were always there at all those hearings. And one of the executive committee members, I mean, they were pushing to testify at the hearing. And, you know, being president, I can just take motions. And one of the executive committees made a comment to another executive committee, because I don't want to get into names, was, well, I have the 3 votes to get this passed. You know, what am I supposed to do? You know, I can talk to him, you know, I try to talk to him. Actually, one of the executive committee members tried to call a meeting. And I put a stop to that because I said the only person that can call a meeting is myself. I mean, we can work together, but, you know, the one executive member called into the office and said, you know, set up this Zoom link. So I put a stop to that. You know, I try to be fair with everybody, but sometimes it can be bowled over and pushed like that, you know, as much as I can try to stop that, I will. Hope that answers your question.
All right, anybody else have one? If not, I'll go back into the chat and look for other, one new message. Oh, here we go. That's a good one based off of what you were just talking about. Compare what the role is of the executive committee with the role of the PFB state board. It seems like the executive committee is making a lot of decisions that should be put before the entire state board. Do the state board members feel that they are serving a meaningful purpose? And I'll just add on to that, that our grassroots representatives at the state level are board members, and the grassroots doesn't have any say in who's on the executive committee. So when these decisions are made, the board should have more say than the executive committee, in my opinion. How do you see that relationship and who does what?
Yeah, okay, so some of that's actually changed. I mean, the executive committee's role is to handle benefits of the employees. A lot of that, like with the pension being gone now, we actually haven't had an executive meeting for probably July, where we were pretty active before when we were working at terminating the pension. We'll probably have an executive meeting coming up in December because we always take a look at salaries. That's part of the executive committee's responsibility. There again, when the dairy situation was going on, I was being pushed to have executive, you know, meetings on that. And when we were looking at the MSC information, you know, the executive committee was trying to work with the account, you know, Mike or Victor to rectify some of that. And then finally the board decided to form that subcommittee. So I took it out of the hands of the executive committee, which was fine with me. You know, I think the more people involved in those type of decisions, the better. So I don't think the executive committee is really going to be meeting a whole lot
Okay.
like they
So-
did before.
So part of the reason why, I mean, I'm going to interpret something and you tell me if I got it right. Part of the reason why over the last few years, the executive committee's become into focus and been more and more controversial, we'll say, is because of the constant changeover at the CAO position. And when there wasn't no interim, the executive committee was that person. And trying to get everything set up has just led to them being more involved as each new CAO gets their feet underneath them. Is that pretty much right? And if there'd be a CAO who'd be around for more than a year, they'd take less and less of a prominent role.
I think probably maybe not as much as what you say there was. I mean, whenever Sam was in the position and we were looking at SafeMark, that was part of the executive committee's role to be part of that discussion because of the confidentiality of, but the board was informed of what was going on. When Sam left, there was probably maybe a little bit more of a role because we were all part of the search committee. And that's when we were dealing with the pension. Now with Todd in there, the executive committee, like I said, has really stepped down a lot of what we've been doing.
Okay. A question in the chat from Julie based off of this discussion. Why are all financial meetings executive committee only? This does not allow transparency to the grassroots membership representatives.
In what way? Like the executive committee's role on developing the budget, they get to see the proposed budget first. And then if there's any questions or anything like that, it's sent back to the managers and through Todd now to make any changes. They're sort of like the preliminary step of that. But then the whole board sees the financial, the budget, and actually every meeting we spend at least an hour or more going through the financials of where the organization's at. So each state director has those financials. I mean, there's nothing secretive about it.
Okay.
You know, the delegates see the audited report, and that's just a total of each division or each entity. For the delegates to see a complete financial statement, it would take some explaining. You know, we always have questions, you know, what's this line item, what's spent there? You know, and somebody just looking at it, you know, might have questions or just wouldn't understand it unless they went through it with, you know, now Kristen, it was Bill Montgomery before.
While I understand not providing that to everyone at the annual meeting, would that be available if we'd request it to just peruse the organization, or how hard is it to get that?
I mean, we've had it asked before, and we've encouraged people to come into the office so we can go through and explain it and answer questions. But just to put it out there, I mean, I don't think it's, you know, wise just to throw that out there because people could take numbers and throw them out there and really cause some chaos if they don't really understand what they're looking at. You know, if there's a line up, just say publications, it's $100,000. Somebody sees, oh, we're spending $100,000 on publication. Why are we spending that kind of money and stuff like that? Where, you know, if come in and sit down and look at it, you know, Kristen now can explain, you know, where that money is or where the costs are of it.
Okay. Before I jump into anything else, it is 9 o'clock. It's what we talked about. If you're good to hang out and take more questions, Rick, we'll go as long as people have questions. So
Yeah,
You're
I'm
good?
fine. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm good. Yeah. I always enjoy conversations like this.
Okay. Um, uh, Here's a question from Harold Hallman, and we keep coming back to this. What, and the answer to this might be there aren't truly defined, but the question is, what are the defined rules between the executive committee versus the defined rules of the state board? And where do they blur, or are they not actually truly defined?
I think they're laid out in the bylaws, but I know the executive committee's responsible of taking a look at salaries. They were responsible for the staff benefits program. So if there's a change in the benefits program, the staff, the CEO presents it to the executive committee, and they can either vote it up, vote it down, or change it. Their role is to put a proposed budget together that the CEO presents to them, and then forward that on to the state board. And then probably take up any other confidential matter that comes before, in between board meetings, and that needs to be taken care of. I mean, I can look at the bylaws and that, so.
Okay. And if anybody has a question that they want to ask, by all means, unmute yourself. I'll just keep referring back to the chat unless I hear you overstep me.
I've got
Part
one,
of,
Doug.
go ahead, Dan.
When you have time, I mean, I
No,
don't want
yeah,
to break in, but if I
go
can.
ahead.
Evening, Dan, how are you?
Hi, Rick. Hey, the one thing I wanted to ask was, it seemed to me, and this is just my observations, that when Carl was a president and he got on the AFBF executive committee and stuff, after a number of years that he had been on that committee, that it seemed like his focus on Pennsylvania Farm Bureau wasn't there like it had been prior, that more of his focus was on the national scene. And I understand that the national scene is very important, but I'm wondering from your perspective, since you're pretty much in the same position with AFBF that Carl was, as I understand it, do you feel like you can, give enough attention to Pennsylvania Farm Bureau with your other commitments on the national stage to make this turnaround that we need in Pennsylvania Farm Bureau?
Pennsylvania is my #1 priority. I look at my role at AFBF is that I can take Pennsylvania's priorities to them. But like I said, my focus is Pennsylvania. That's where it's at. Again, Pennsylvania's member is my #1 priority, and whatever I can help in a county succeed, that's where I'm going to be at. Yeah, I have a lot of responsibility at AFBF, but again, my priority is Pennsylvania. And that's why I'm running again. I mean, I could walk away from it, and throw my hands up and say, whatever happens to Pennsylvania happens to Pennsylvania. But that's, I've been so involved in Pennsylvania for so long. That's my first priority.
And do you feel that, if you see that it gets to a point for one reason or another that Pennsylvania needs your attention more than the national level, do you think you can step away from the national stuff enough to handle what needs to be handled in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the board meets 4 times a year. We have an executive meeting every month, AFBF executive. Most of it's Zoom, except whenever we meet in person. But whatever I need to do in Pennsylvania is going to be my first priority.
Thanks for explaining that.
Yeah, and I mean, if I have to miss a meeting at national, that something needs my attention in Pennsylvania, I'll stay here in Pennsylvania. And Zippy and I have a good working relationship. He understands that too, so.
Thank you, Dan. A question from earlier in the chat. These words came up a little bit last night. Talk about your views on transparency within the organization and the fiduciary responsibility of PFB leadership.
I think we need to be as transparent as we can. I'm sure you're probably talking about the MSC that happened this past week. There are confidentiality agreements that we have to adhere to and protect the organization. But I think as much as we can put out there, we will.
Okay.
Somebody, asked, how we got the, MSC's sale in that. Every year, the delegates have seen the negative deficits with MSC, and they were just compounding. So we had to take the stance of protecting the base organization from, it doesn't make sense for members' dues being put into a profit organization when it should be the other way around.
Okay. On that transparency note, your answer to this might be, I can't say anything, but it's just popped into my head, so I'm kind of curious. How much of Mike Stalica leaving after his short time was a surprise to you? And how much of it was you could see the writing on the wall and he kind of seemed overwhelmed in the position? Just curious as to how that went down.
Actually, I mean, it was a little bit of a surprise to me, because actually when he met, I'd actually put a meeting of the executive committee together to talk to him about setting goals and, how we can improve his compensation and him working with the organization. And that's actually when he told us that he was going to resign. Looking in hindsight, I mean, I guess looking that he wasn't as engaged as I would hoped him to be. Actually, I had been reaching out to him more and more to try to build that CEO president relationship. But I was actually really surprised that, we had set up a meeting to discuss, different compensation levels, different goals for him to achieve for the organization. And that's when he told us that he was resigning.
Okay.
So it was a little bit of both.
No, that's insight that we didn't have before, so thank you.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, my concern was he came from the corporate world, so he didn't understand Farm Bureau and how we operated. So I was trying to work with him a little bit to understand our culture a little bit, his role and my role in that. So, but I think it probably just got overwhelmed with it. It was a whole different style for him that he wasn't prepared to take on.
Okay, makes sense. A question from Harold Hallman in the chat. Does a decision by the executive committee need approval from the state board? I'm sure the answer to this is it depends, but can you go in depth to that a little bit?
I mean, yeah, it depends. Like I said, salaries are kept confidential because we don't want salaries to be public knowledge because of the opportunity for people to be stolen. I see that at AFBF all the time. I know Sam gets very frustrated that He loses good staff all the time because of people not knowing salaries, but being offered a lot more money than what they can provide. So we really don't want salaries out there to be viewed by everyone. For the, where John Bell worked for us, I mean, he was a steal for us at the level of salary that we paid him. He could have very easily gone into, the outside world and made double or triple of what he did. But, he was a loyal Farm Bureau employee. So that's one area that, doesn't take state board approval. The budget does take state board approval. When we did the sale of St. Mark, the executive committee recommended the proposal that the broker had put together to the state board for final approval.
Okay. Another question from Harold, and I really, really like this. I'm like to see where you run with this. Which is more important to you as president, driving PFB policies or membership? And no, you can't say both.
Well, I'd have to say, my goal was to drive PFB policy and encourage counties to develop programs so they're front facing for their community members that helps drive membership.
Mhm.
I think what drives membership is the county activity, because people see what's going on in the county and want to be part of it. At the state level, that's more, policy driven. But we encourage counties to continue to work membership in that.
Okay.
Hope that sort of answers. I mean, I think at my level, it needs to be policy driven, building those relationships, taking our policies to, the agencies, the legislators, working with our staff to implement those policies. But, driving membership is important also. And I think that's a county thing. I know Joe always said when he was county president, they were always in the news. They were always doing stuff that was in the community, and they had no problem getting membership. And I think more of the counties that can become active and develop program, getting involved with their chambers, their Lions clubs, their Rotaries, helps drive membership.
Okay. Any questions from the group? I think I've hit just about everything that's in the chat in one way or another.
Mel should have another one.
I'm not sure. I would like to know what on earth Andy's eating over there.
I mean, I could ask another one.
Sure.
Rick, you know me so well. So you were saying how some of the meetings and stuff with the executive committee. Yeah, I'm going to go back to the executive committee. I'm sorry. But you were saying how, sometimes some of these meetings, you were saying about the over order premium hearings and the meeting was shut down and whatnot. And I completely understand what you were talking about. But I would like to know why, if these were hot button issues, which obviously the OOP hearings were, and it's a Farm Bureau as a whole, and we had that policy and whatnot go through at last year's delegate session. And I'm just curious, simply it's my own curiosity of why would meetings, maybe not that specific situation, but maybe why were meetings not held more frequently to talk about those hot button issues from a executive committee standpoint, being that there is our state board who is representing the grassroots, and as an executive committee, working towards having the good front of Pennsylvania Farm Bureau and being that relationship with the staff as well. Like, why wouldn't more communication be a good thing, I guess?
No, I mean, I think communication's good. I mean, I think I guess going back to the dairy thing, I mean, a policy was passed in November. We had our state board meeting in January. I think it was probably discussed some, but then they were looking at having testimony written by the middle of February. So I think maybe a little bit of the timing there caused some of the turmoil. And I, maybe on Dave Graybill's part, he maybe should have called the dairy committee meeting together a little bit more to discuss that policy and direction for the hearing. I'm not going to blame anybody. I mean, I could blame myself too for not, I was frustrated a little bit with that change, that huge change for our organization with a policy like that, and trying to understand the dynamics of what we were getting into.
Sure. And then on that, and just as another side topic, but also the last question I wanted to ask you, and kind of playing off that a little bit, is there anything in your time as PFB's president that you do regret and that you would like to change?
No, I mean, I guess this past year from, I'd have to say, halfway through Mike Stalika's being here and going through getting beat up on both sides on the dairy issue was very frustrating for me. I was trying to do the best I could for the organization. I was trying to protect the organization. Whenever I make a decision on something like that, I think about the organization as a whole. I mean, that policy would have hurt me, but I was more concerned about making sure the organization was protected from a lot of turmoil, and that was the hardest part of seeing what was happening, of the different forces there.
All right. Any other questions before we let Rick go and enjoy his evening? And the rest of us can eat our dessert like Andy.
I'm gonna eat supper. I'm gonna eat supper then. So.
Yeah.
Since I had my dessert, I do have a question, okay?
Okay.
My question, Rick, is especially in our area, Chester, Delaware County, Montgomery County, Bucks County, Berks County, Southeast Pennsylvania. Our issue is trying to get new members to come on board. And what can possibly you at PFB, being president, do to help come alongside the counties and help promote the membership? A lot of the benefits for being a Pennsylvania Farm Bureau doesn't help us locally. Is there anything that we could do, or you as president could propose as coming alongside the individual counties to help promote the benefits in a way. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's why I said, I think I would encourage more counties to get involved with their Chamber of Commerce and stuff like that. Because you're you're forward facing with those people, they're business people. I'm trying to think where I was at. Fayette County. They became part of their local Chamber of Commerce. And they're doing a farm to table dinner there each year now. I actually attended it this year. Inviting their chamber people there. I mean, it's a paper person event. And they had 150 people at this farm to table dinner. And they were getting memberships out of it. Because those business people saw the value of their local farmers and what Farm Bureau was doing. And that's why I encourage, counties to think of different things that they can do, get involved in the chamber and that. I'm going to suggest those things. I'm not going to tell you to do that, because if I don't have the buy-in of the county, I'm wasting my time.
Right.
It's the members in the county that have to put those things together, because it's your county. It's
Right.
your heartbeat of the organization.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
All right. Anything else here as we wrap up? Not, Rick, thank you. Sincerely, we really appreciate you spending almost an hour and a half with us.
Yeah.
Once we found the right link to click on. So,
Yeah, I mean, I'm more involved, I'm more than willing to come out to counties and be a part of it. I'm not going to force myself to a county. I mean, that's not my role. And, I'll support a county in whatever way they want me to help them out. So.
okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for your many years service to the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau.
Thank you for the opportunity, and hopefully I can get your support this fall. So.
Okay. Have a good rest of your evening, and to everybody who joined, thank you so much for taking the time. And I will be sending the recording out, so share it with your members who were not able to make it tonight. So thank you all. Have a good night.
Okay. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
All right.